Dedicated to geeks and nerds, you're listening to Project I Radio, 24/7 Nerdgasm.
Bizzong.
Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong.
This is Bizzong, a bizarre and weird fiction podcast. With me, your host, Mr. Frank. Zongers, welcome back. Here we are, once again, celebrating everything funkin' weird. Zongers, last week I talked about the CrawlCon and what an amazing time I had at the CrawlCon, and that I was unable to get my podcasting equipment up there to kind of cover the event for you. So, this week, Zongers, I brought on one of the people I met at CrawlCon, and a guy who really made an impression on me there at CrawlCon. So I had to invite him on the podcast to get his take on CrawlCon and everything that happened there. This week, we have one Mr. Justin Grimbol. Justin Grimbol is a poet and a prose maker, and he's just a goddamn fun guy to be around. Justin and I had a lot to talk about at CrawlCon, and he immediately struck me as a guy I wanted to have on very quickly here on Bizzong. So I invited him on, and he was more than happy to join us. We talk about a lot of great things, and especially CrawlCon related, about what it takes to do great readings. It's one thing to be a writer out there, but for the first time at CrawlCon, I did a reading of one of my pieces, and it's a different experience than writing, obviously, but it's an important thing to do as a writer, to get out there and present your work as you hear it in your head. And you'll hear about how going out there and reading work it's a lot more than just opening your mouth and reading the words. There's a performance and a presence you have to have doing it. And Justin Grimbol, he had a very big presence in the room when he was doing his reading from his book, The Party Lords. So, we're going to talk to Justin Grimbol. He's the author of The Party Lords, Hard Bodies, Naked Friends, and Drinking Until Morning. So, without further ado, on to the Bizzong interview of Justin Grimbol. So, I would like to welcome to Bizzong this week the one and only Mr. Justin Grimbol. Justin Grimbol, welcome to Bizzong.
Thanks for having me, man.
It's a pleasure. Now, you and I just got back from the CrawlCon, right? We
did.
And that was a good time.
It was a good time. I was so tired during it that it was like I was stoned the entire time. I had slept well the night before, but I loved it. I had a great time.
It was my intention to actually bring my podcasting equipment up there.
Oh, shit. Yeah, that would be a good idea.
As luck would have it, I got attacked by termites and everything, and I got thrown into a fracas, and I didn't bring it up. And I gave a brief rundown on it on my last episode. And, it kind of like, I think it was almost good that I didn't bring the podcasting equipment because, I mean, for Saturday, for 10 hours, I mean, it was
the longest readings ever. Yeah. No, it was nothing but panels and readings from like 1 until 10 at night. It was great, but it was intense. There wasn't much time to fit anything in.
So I don't know where I would have podcasted in all that space anyway.
No, completely. Yeah,
except for cigarette breaks, which the whole room emptied out anyway. So
yeah, no, yeah, definitely. No, we needed that. We needed that breather, that fresh air of cigarettes.
Yes, indeed. So, well, I got you freshly on the podcast, freshly off CrawlCon.
Sure.
Let's use this opportunity to kind of cover CrawlCon a little bit more. That's how we'll start off with this. Okay?
Yeah, go for it, man.
Okay, so first of all, what brought you to CrawlCon this year?
Well, I went to CrawlCon, not the last one, but the one before, just out of curiosity. Like, I liked Crawl's work, and I wanted to check it out. I liked how small it was. I liked how intimate the convention was. It was quite a bit different. It was like in a Best Western and stuff. But the readings were really fun. We just had a good time and shit. This time, I'm only living like a few hours away from it. So I really wanted to prioritize it. And it was cool to see that the convention had grown. I mean, how many people were at this thing, do you think? Like 20, 30?
I think
like
25 to 30.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I think this thing started off pretty small. Like the last one I was at was like maybe like 12, 15 people, you know?
Yeah.
But it's great, man. I love conventions like this. I love conventions that are small, you know what I mean? That there's like a source of intimacy, you know? And that's kind of what drove me to it. You know, like, I'm a fan of whatever it is that Crawl's trying to create, of whatever the community is that Crawl's trying to, you know, like, help strengthen through this convention. And I want to support it.
Yeah, that was my biggest thing when I saw it. You know, out here on the East Coast, we don't have that big representation like you have out with the BizarroCon out on the West Coast. So
right.
when I saw he was doing this, I just had to be a part of it. Like, I'll just tell me where to be and I'll be there, you know?
Yeah, no, completely. There's nothing else like this going on in the East Coast, you know?
Right.
And it's that's a lot of fun, you know? It's a very different entity than the one in the West Coast, but I like it just as much.
Yeah, and you nailed it with the intimacy. It's you know, we say CrawlCon, but it's 25, 30 people, and it's like an artistic celebration. It's not just readings. There's music, there's poetry, there's these crazy almost performance type things. And
it's amazing, you know. I wish I'd missed the music this time around. I saw a couple of performances, but not as much. I went to a convention in Minneapolis last year, AWP, and that was fun. There were some moments. MP Johnson set up a reading at this old punk bar, and that was like awesome, like one of the best readings I've ever done. But the convention itself was like really lacking to me, because not only was it too spread out and there's too many people and everyone was trying too hard to be like professional, but everyone also seemed like socially burnt out. So like whenever I'd meet someone I thought was interesting, like ultimately they were like just kind of putting on a certain level of a show because they were socially spreading themselves so thin, you know, trying to seem professional to so many different people. So I like the small thing. I think people's best versions of themselves come out in small gatherings.
Yeah, and what I liked too was the readings. You know, there were a lot of readings, but with a small group and with an eclectic sort of selection that we had, I think all the readings were really great. I wasn't bored out of my mind by any of them, really.
Yeah, you know, I was talking when we were at the con, I was mentioning to you that I always decide, after a series of readings, I always decide who won the reading. You know, it's just usually the reading that stands out to me the most, or the reading that was the most impressive or most entertaining, you know. But I still can't come up with, I still can't figure out who won the CrawlCon readings. You know, all those weird love poems that Crawl read to fucking Lopresti was fucking hilarious.
Right.
That young kid, what was that kid's name? Like Brian O'Connell or something?
Yeah. He was, wow.
He was shocking. You know, his short story was really bizarre, and he read really eloquently. You know, like your reading was hilarious. You know, there was a lot of great readings. John Myers really impressed me. You know, I saw him do his first reading, and I remember him being really nervous and quiet. And I've seen him do some other good readings, but he was like really like fully like, I don't know, like he seemed really himself, and he was really cracking me up, and he was really enjoying himself up there. In a way, for me, I'd actually say he was the one that won for me. I most enjoyed seeing him read, which is impressive because he read at the end of a really long stretch of performers.
Yes.
But, you know, he just seemed so him. It was like, yeah, it was awesome. It was a really fun time.
And what I liked about him was, you know, he was cracking his own self up reading his story.
Oh, it's the best. And no one's funnier to laugh with than the performer themselves.
Oh, yeah.
The best comedians are like that, too. I love watching a comedian that just starts cracking himself up in the middle of their own set, you know?
Oh, yeah, that's the best. That's when you know, like, it's just easy peasy Japanese. Your reading was...
Throwing down the easy peasy.
Your reading was really exceptional. You have a monster presence in the room. I mean, when you stepped up and you just started, your voice booms, and you were, like, just owning all those words and exploding. And you had a funny piece, too.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
obviously you've done readings before. What do you try to aim for when you do readings?
Oh yeah, straight comedy. Like for me, you know, I try to get a lot into my writing. I try to get some drama in there. I try to get some of my own personal philosophy and, you know, a whole bunch of artsy stuff into my actual books. But my like primary goal as an author is to make people laugh. And when I'm reading, that's like 100% my goal. My book, The Party Lords, is really easy to read from because there's like a bunch of jokes per page. Where I have some books where it's like there's some really funny parts, but like it takes a while to get to them, and you have to read through a bunch of stuff that isn't so funny to get to that part. No, I love to make people laugh, man. And man, that's great. That's like a great, really rewarding thing when you get a bunch of people laughing at your book. But it also means that when people don't laugh, the reading can be just like torture. And I used to read with a lot of poets back when I lived in Racine, Wisconsin. And I always was so jealous because most of their poems weren't meant to be funny. So they could just get up there and perform, and it was all just about them performing as well as they could, but they didn't have to worry about a response. Where I would get up there, and I would be reading, but I'd also be listening to see if I was getting people laughing and shit. And if I didn't, I did this one reading in Cincinnati where, oh man, I learned my lesson with this shit. The whole thing was body humor, right? I was going to do this whole thing where I was going to have teach the audience Grimbol style karate, and I was going to like do all these hilarious things like twerking my butt around and fucking like rubbing my man boobs at people and shit, and like do all these weird dances and shit. And it was going to be like, in my mind, it was going to be like the funniest thing ever. But the problem is that no one found it funny. And there's nothing more humiliating than doing a bunch of fucking like goofy body things and no one laughing at you. And then you just kind of have to continue and shit. The worst part about this reading is it's on YouTube. It's like the most like embarrassing reading I've ever done. And it has like a couple hundred hits on fucking YouTube. I curse the day, man. I curse the day.
I thought it was appropriate that we bring up the reading tape because there's an article on Facebook going around from the AWP convention or the aftermath from Justin Grimbol. You're Justin Grimbol from Gabino Iglesias. And it's basically you all suck at reading, and it's this list of like things you just need not do when you do readings or things you need to do, and it's it just stresses being loud, owning the room, being a performer, not just a reader. Don't put your head down, know your material, and just, add extra flair to what you're reading. And that's like exactly what came across when you read, Oh,
I appreciate that, man. And Gabino's a great reader, too. I saw him read at BizarroCon a bunch of years ago when he first was part of the new Bizarro Author Series, man. And he won that shit, man. He won the whole convention, in my opinion, that year. His reading was by far the best. It was downright poetry, man. It was fucking completely bizarre, shocking, hilarious. Oh, it was so good. I don't know if that thing's on tape, man. I hope that someone taped that shit because it was amazing.
I'll have to look all those up.
He's a great reader. Yeah. MP Johnson, that's another reader. I took a lot of cues from MP Johnson, man. Like, when I saw him read the first bunch of times, I was so blown away. I was like, I gotta try to freaking muster some of that. I need to channel some MP Johnson next time I read.
He was mentioned directly in that blog post and basically said, like stand on chairs like MP Johnson.
Oh, yeah. Unreal. Yeah, he's unreal when he reads. Like I've seen him win so many readings, man. Yeah, he's unbelievable.
I love that you judge. That's the best thing ever.
I got to. It's just how my mind works, man. Like and it's not really, it's really funny. It's not really a competitive thing because for me, who wins the reading isn't necessarily, often it is the best reader at the show, but it's not necessarily. Like I said, like for me, John Myers and that Brian O'Connell were the one that CrawlCon. It doesn't mean they were the best.
Right.
In terms of the person who read the most and like was the most charismatic, there were plenty. Like there were people that read just as well, if not better than them. But for whatever reason, that's the one that like
It's like affected the
took
whole
me
room.
in, you know, like that. I don't know what it is. It's just some weird thing, you know. And it's also, I don't know, like there's a reason for why there's like, you know, like a ranking system for anything. It's fun just to celebrate people, you know. So when I'm saying a person won a performance, it's just really my way of celebrating that person. You know what I mean?
Yeah. When you came up to me after those readings and mentioned, like, you know, I always kind of pick a reading, and I think you mentioned Brian O'Connell there, and I was like, you know, I hadn't really considered that type of like picking a winner thing, but like you're right, like because you know and like you said, it may not have been like the best reading, the best thing, but it was like here's this 14-year-old kid that just walked up and, I mean, read a story that's written like an adult.
It was nuts, man. Made me want to step my game up. I was like, I gotta start rehearsing more, man. That kid, when he did his first reading, I don't think he like stuttered over a line.
No, he didn't stutter. He did not come off as nervous at all, and just he owned the story, and the story was just dark and like, oh my god,
immersive, man. It wasn't even my type of shit. It was fully serious.
Oh
like,
yeah.
Not a single joke throughout the entire thing. And I was just completely like in it. And I'm like, I'm fucking like really listening to this 14-year-old kid's story. I'm like, he has some kahunas, man. I was blown away.
That was fantastic. Now you mentioned you read from Party Lords. So let's discuss Party Lords.
Yeah, sure, man. It's one of my faves that I've ever done. That's
the first thing I ever read from you. And it was like, I guess when it came out, you just had like buzz on that book. That's all I was seeing. Anybody was like, "Oh, you got to get this Party Lords." Oh my god, the Party Lords! Everybody was talking about Party Lords, so
people
I picked it up, and I was like, "Motherfucker, this is great. It's a party to read. It's like reading an '80s teen movie fucking thing, man.
Yeah, that's kind of the goal.
A blast. How much of that is factual?
Oh, that one? You're asking on the wrong book on this one. Interesting thing. When it comes to my books, you know, I have my autobiographical books like Drinking Until Morning and Hard Bodies, right?
Yeah.
And that shit's like 90% factual. And a lot of my other fiction was like, you know, like the Crud Masters has a bunch of real shit in it and a bunch of characters based on real people. But by the time I got into the Party Lords, it became important to me just for the sake of shits and giggles, just for the sake of having fun, man. I put a concerted effort not to intentionally base anything on my own life. But that being said, the one thing that happened in the book that happened in real life was the dingleberry scene. That shit's real. I one time was hooking up with a girl, not a teenager. She was very of age. She was my age, if not a little older. But we were hooking up in my kitchen, and I was, you know, like, you know, doing my thing. And there's a dingleberry, and I'm like, I'm not letting this fucking dingleberry ruin my good time. I just like bit that thing out and then spit it. God knows where that fucking thing landed. But yeah, I spit that thing away, and yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. But another thing that, you know, if you're going to say autobiographical stuff, I might have projected into it a bit. This obviously isn't a real thing, but when there's that mutant that's covered in boils and cutting open his boils and shit.
Yeah.
When I'm not doing well, I do 3 things on YouTube that are like weird habits that when I'm doing this shit, I know I'm not doing well. That's watching old videos of Long Island hardcore bands, watching Star Trek fan fiction, and when I'm really doing bad, watching videos of boils getting lanced.
Oh boy.
I love that shit when I'm down and out, man. I will watch fucking boils getting lanced. Cows, when cows have abscesses and they pop those things open and like green stuff's pouring out and shit. I don't know why. It's a sickness, but I love it. So that's why I put that into the book. It was kind of me kind of fucking with that. And there's a character towards the end who's vaguely based on a real friend. The rich guy, I think I named him Troy in the book, is based on a real friend. And I remember when I first wrote it, I was like, really made the guy just seem like the worst. And then I was like, man, this guy's not really that bad in real life. Like, I should try to make amends a little bit for, and so I changed the ending and tried to make him a more sympathetic character.
Now, Party Lords and a lot of your work typically gets called Bizarro.
Right.
Do you feel you're Bizarro?
Bizarro is always going to be my my home. It's always going to be the place I kind of feel most comfortable in, and I discovered that very much when I was when I lived in the Midwest. I met a lot of poets, and I worked in a performance series called Bonk out of Racine, and I would tour around and I would go do readings all over the place and open mics, and I enjoyed the poetry scene, but it kind of definitely also reminded me that my true home will always be Bizarro, no matter what I'm working on. A lot of my stuff is Bizarro. Even my autobiographical stuff, which is not really Bizarro, has that kind of love for the absurd and that love for campiness and that love for kind of that feeling you get at the end of watching a good Twilight Zone episode where you're like, what the fuck? That good, what the fuck feeling. Even with my autobiographical stuff, I kind of lean towards that effect. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is, the Bizarros that inspire me a lot, like Melick and shit, they influence my autobiographical stuff just as much. So yeah, I would consider myself a Bizarro author because I'm very fond of the scene and the intimacy that's created and, the people that are behind it. That's where I feel at home. Even the stuff that's like my poetry that's completely not weird and,
it has that mood.
Yeah, I mean, Party Lords I consider thoroughly Bizarro. I'd consider, obviously, the Crud Masters is Bizarro.
Right.
There's elements of Bizarro in Naked Friends. And the stuff I'm working on right now, there's some stuff that I'm in the midst of working on that's very Bizarro.
Well, speaking about the what the fuck sort of aspect, I just got done a few days ago reading Hard Bodies.
Yeah.
And I guess after the first few chapters, I was kind of like, wow, what the fuck? Because I'm always drawn to these stories, and I don't know why. Is your stories in Hard Bodies are very just regular, everyday life.
Right.
And it's almost like you get done with the chapter and you're like, well, what made that a story? But I liked it,
Yeah.
And you get that, what the fuck?
It makes a more poetic sense. The goal is to make, it doesn't have an arc, it doesn't have a story arc. It doesn't really have to a degree, not much happens, but, no hero's journey going on in this one or anything. But, they're much more like prose poems in a way.
How hard was that for you to write? Because you just said that's about 90% true story.
The editing was a little hard. The writing was the easiest thing ever.
Really?
I wrote that thing while it was happening.
Uh-huh.
So, every chapter is the stuff that happened the day before I wrote it.
Nice.
And then I went through, and I was actually, I had no intention of making it into a book. I was just going to post it up on a blog, right? But then I was reading over it, and I was like, whoa, this makes kind of weird poetic sense. This kind of has an interesting beginning and an interesting ending. And then I added some stuff, you know what I mean? Some stuff that I might have forgotten or some stories from other times. And I added this part about my dad's ball sack. If I felt like the book was uneven, I'm like, there needs a little more butts in there, a little more balls over there. I threw them in when needed, But everything's pretty much, that's as close to 100% autobiographical as I think you can get, really, because I wrote it. The only problem with writing that fucking book is now when I do autobiographical stuff that takes place way back in the day, I've been trying to work on my road trip books, and that it's all 8 years old, all that stuff happened 8 years ago.
Uh-huh.
I have this need to remember details that are just not possible to remember. Mm-hmm. Because I wrote Hard Bodies while it was happening, so I could remember almost everything that was said and done,
Now, I think when I closed the last page, the biggest thing I took away from Hard Bodies was that, man, you really like to smell butts.
I love that shit so damn much. Yeah.
And that's what
I hate that I live in a world where I can't just run around smelling everyone's butts, man. It's it's a hard life.
That's awesome. When I met you at CrawlCon, that's kind of probably the first thing I said to you. You were like, "Yeah, man, fucking love smelling butts."
I love it.
You
I
own
love
it. How hard is that?
You know what my biggest thing that I always hate whenever people say is like sex isn't bizarro, or like nothing shocking about butts. And
Yeah.
I'm like, who gives a fuck? Who gives a fuck if it's shocking or not weird? Like if anything, it's fucking weird. Like I do actually think it's weird. I love the fact that everyone walks around trying to act so dignified, but everyone has buttholes and shit. Like I love that. It's one of the most poetic things ever. Everyone has a butthole. It's a great, wonderful thing.
I don't suppose you had much trouble wrestling with putting that on paper. That level of honesty, like your dad's balls, or just jamming your face right into a butthole.
No, yeah. I mean, like my first book, Drinking Until Morning, involved a little more of a struggle towards honesty. There was some stuff in Hard Bodies that was hard. The butt stuff, though, is easy because I don't know. I mean, when I grew up, when I was like a young guy, I, went through puberty early. I was a horn dog early on. I was just kind of, desperate and kind of awkward, especially when I was young. And at a certain point in my adolescence, I kind of trained myself not to get embarrassed. Like, I'm not the type of person. I'll get embarrassed of things like in the long run. Like I'll think back to shit and I'll be like, oh, that's embarrassing. But when it's happening, I don't really get embarrassed. It's a weird thing about me. If it is embarrassing, I'll just kind of shut off and like go into like a kind of no reaction land. But butts, man, yeah, no, I don't get weird about butts. I mean, socially, people just know this about me, Socially, like, I have such a staring problem, too. So if there's anyone with a nice butt around, I'm just fucking, like, Hawkeyeing that thing so hard,
Uh-huh.
And people will say that shit to me. Like, I'll go into a social situation trying to be all professional, and people will be like, oh, my God, it's hilarious how obviously you were staring at that wet woman's butt. Like, I was trying to do it on purpose or something. And I was like, and I'll just get like, oh, no, it's hopeless.
It was just happening.
I gotta pay tribute, man.
That's I always love that in anybody's writing when you can tell it's real. People are recounting their lives, they're being autobiographical and that
right.
honest with themselves. It always seems to me like I think if I were to do it, I would hide it behind some fiction shit. And
yeah. I mean, people do that.
I mean,
and that's its own kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. I mean, I was talking to when I spoke with CV Hunt, and she I was blown away by her nailing a male point of view, like the inner psyche, stuff that guys
yeah, she's great at it.
They don't talk about themselves.
I need to finish reading that one. That one, yeah, I read the first chapter when I got the book in the mail, but I haven't been in a horror novel kind of mood lately. But yeah, she's great. She's one of the best.
I'm just always blown away by that level of crazy honesty. I gotta hone you to get that level of honesty out of myself in my writing.
Right, and the thing is, in her writing, I would say, like, though that is the first book to take the male perspective directly in like a first-person narrative, it's obvious how well she understands men in all of her books. Like, I love, like, the element of gender is, like, very obvious in all of her books. Like, you can tell, like, the roles that men and women play with each other in her novels are very realistic to me.
Yeah.
Or at least feel very true. Realistic is a weird word, because I don't think that realism is what people should always go for in books, or is actually really that obtainable. But there's, like, a kind of, the word, like going for something that feels very true is a different thing, because something can feel true without feeling realistic.
Yeah, I agree. I think what I'm saying is, like, instead of talking about something I did, I would make a monster and make him do the awkward thing.
Yeah.
And then it's a monster. It's totally not
I agree.
life.
And that's what's fun, like
distracting.
Yeah.
Do you write more? I haven't read your whole collection. Do you write more that not realistic stuff, non-real life stuff?
Oh, I wish I could like control it a little more. Like, there's times where I'm like, I'm just going to do this from now on, or I'm just going to focus on poetry, or I'm just going to focus on short stories, or just bizarro. And it has so much to do with what mood I'm in. I can discipline myself to only an extent. Yeah, I write, the chapbook that came out during CrawlCon is horror, but like a really kind of absurdist version of horror. So it's kind of bizarro in a way. I write a lot of stuff. I'd say at this point, like on a page per page level, I've written more just like weird fiction stuff than I've written autobiographical. It's a little bit more fun, you know. Sometimes when I'm writing the autobiographical stuff, it's really tedious because you're kind of revisiting painful stuff and you have to somehow try and make it funny, and that can just be a chore sometimes, you know.
Now you also you have the poetry aspect to your writing.
Right.
I've never read your poetry, but you know, you said hard bodies. The absence of story is kind of what makes that prose poetic. What is your more straightforward poetry like?
The first book, The Creek, is kind of a compilation of a lot of my earlier stuff. It's now I'll dive a little bit more into metaphor and goofy language a little bit. I'll be more okay. The posts I put on Facebook that kind of end with the like vote for this random person.
Yes.
2016.
Yes.
Those are all essentially prose poems. Like that's what my poetry's like.
Oh, okay. So
it's kind of like there's a casualness to it, but a very obvious like attempt to capture something a little more spiritual, I guess. I'm a minister's kid, by the way. That's why I throw around the word spiritual so much. But yeah, and then I have a book hopefully coming out soon that's all minivan poems, and that's like real weird. Like if poetry was to go into the bizarro, like it's always hard for me to know like what makes, you know, like what is bizarro poetry. Minivan poems that I've been writing are as close to that as I've come. You know, it's very bizarre stuff, very surreal, very like atmospheric and shit.
You said
so. There's anything I love. If there's anything that comes in second to my love of butts, it's my love of minivan.
You said minivan.
Yeah, I love me a minivan, dude.
Wow.
Combine butt and minivan, I'm a happy man.
What is it about minivans that makes your world just swirl around them?
I bonded with the shit, man. You know, like my dad, for whatever reason, always had like a fleet of minivans around. I don't know why. I think it's because he was like a minister and would have to drive his youth group around and shit, and it was just like what was like convenient. But then I would get the hand-me-down van, you know. And I just loved the minivan because like you could just fit as many of your friends in as you want, and you had to kind of set I know people like buy cars because they think they look cool and they think that the car gives them a certain type of status or whatever, and I get that. If you're driving like a fancy fucking like sports car, I get that might make you look cool. I've just never thought about it that way. Like I just never go into it that way. But when I have a minivan, it's obvious that I'm driving around something that like a middle-aged person's supposed to be driving and shit. And I was driving those things when I was like in middle school. And one of the things I did when I drove around the country was I took the seats out of the back and I put it in a mattress.
Oh.
Right? So I treated it like it was kind of like an RV.
Uh-huh.
And that was fine, except I just kept it in there. And I just like all year round driving around with a fucking mattress in the back of the minivan. And I remember I was with my friend Melissa one time. And we were in Vermont, and we saw this kid hitchhiking, and we knew he was from the same town as us. So we picked him up, and he got in, and he saw the mattress, and he climbed on top, and you can tell he was completely like, what the fuck's with the mattress? Like, what am I sitting on? And I'm like, man, I completely didn't realize how uncomfortable this would get. And then my friend Melissa just looks back at him, and he goes, my friend Grimble's going to fuck you. And the kid just looked terrified. I was like, oh, no, she's kidding. And, you know, anyway, it's just stuff like that. Certain level of adventures like that, you know. I've just bonded with the things.
That's great. I think when the Dodge Caravans first came out.
Yeah.
Like my grandfather had like one of them, like one of the first models. I thought they were like the pimpest ride going. Like this is amazing. It's a car and a van. Because I always loved
things are awesome, man.
Conversion vans. Always like I love those things. So this is like the best of both worlds. And then they got that bad rap for a long time. I'm still trying to convince my wife that, you know, we need a minivan. Do you think like it's almost rock star now? I see like, you know, Dave Grohl is rocking the Nissan minivan and he's got, you know, black leather thing and there's pumas jumping out of the back and lightning and they're playing like these Spinal Tap riffs.
I mean, Gen Xers, man, we don't know how to let go. Like we don't know how to like. It's funny because I mainly make fun of millennials, but Gen Xers like. We're like, oh shit, we're growing up. We can't like be doing uncool things. We got to make that uncool thing cool. we need to make that shit still like, these kids can't have their fucking superhero movies. Superhero movies need to be for adults now, you know? Like, we can't let anything go, and it's kind of adorable and kind of awful. But yeah, I mean, I think minivans are awesome because a fucking real van this day and age with fucking, you know, like gas and, yeah, no, I can't handle that shit. I mean, that would be awesome, you know, but I just, you know.
It's a hard sell.
I guess I'm still trying to convince my wife to fucking get us in a minivan again, you know. She's not into it, though. She's not hearing that shit, you know.
I feel your pain. But I'll tell you what.
Yeah, but she knows that it's not me trying to be practical. She's like, I talk about it like, well, you got to understand, babe. It's a minivan and it can da-da-da-da-da. But the reality is that I want to fucking rip the back seats out and put a mattress in and feel like I'm young again because I'm a fucking Gen Xer, you know? I think about things in that way, too, a lot, like generation stuff. But.
Is that, are you like, pop culture? Is that like a thing for you?
Oh, what do you mean?
Like, you have like hard bodies, and that's it's like the cover looks like a '80s VHS.
Right. Yeah, initially, most of my books have different titles. Initially, Prunty always like catches me on my bad titles. I don't remember what the fuck Hard Bodies was called initially, but it was called something stupid. I think it was called like Lazy Ass Goblinoid or something like that initially, and he was like, Grimbol, fuck off with that title. And I'm like, you're right. And I just like was looking through the internet, and I saw actually like an old exercise video called Hard Bodies, and I was like, Hard Bodies, that's hilarious. What's it called? Naked Friends was initially just called Boner PI, and you know, what's it called? Party Lords was initially called Idiot's Guide to Dry Humping.
Oh, nice.
Which I love that title, but Prunty and I both agreed that like there were already a number of books that were coming out with that kind of title that were kind of the faux and like, you know, like instructional guide type of thing. Yeah. So we decided to go for something else.
How is it?
But yeah, pop culture. I mean, I grew up on that shit. You know, like I was part raised by my television. You know, like I got into Bizarro from, you know, like trying to watch fucking late night. I mean, not Bizarro fiction itself, but Bizarro-ish type shit by, you know, staying up late and trying to watch like late night fucking Showtime movies to fucking jerk off to. And then most of them were like, you know, those fucking like steamy like thrillers, you know, usually like some weird Glass House, you know, invader movie. And, with, you know, women with like huge fake breasts. And then one night fucking Class of Nukem High comes on.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, what the fuck? And I like, you know, about like 10 minutes late, I press record on my, you know, I put a tape in, I press record. And I was just like, this is so fucking weird. Like, who the fuck came up with this shit? You know? And then I watched, then the next night fucking Class of Nukem High 2 came on, the Class of Nukem High 3, and I was like, this is too much. And I think that was the first time I even noticed that there were movies that were kind of mind fucks like that. So yeah, I mean, I have like a love-hate with it. You know, I think our relationship to all that stuff is equal portions poisonous and kind of sweet at the same time. You know, I love all those old movies and shit, and I still love all the... Like, you know, I've been rewatching a lot of John Waters movies recently, or trying to get my wife to, and she's been hating me for it. Because, you know, like, there's only two reasons to really enjoy a John Waters movie, and that's nostalgia and if you're really stoned, you know? And we were neither, and I'm, like, trying to get her to watch Desperate Living, and she was like, Jesus fucking Christ, you know, the fucking scene with the mangled penis and shit. But yeah, no, I grew up on a lot of pop culture, man. I grew up listening to, you know, hip hop and punk, and I have a weird, irrational respect for fucking celebrities and shit. You know, like I'll listen to what they say about politics, even though they're just fucking, you know, they're just fucking actors and shit. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about, but. You know, like, I'm like, if Leo said something against climate change, you know, it's just fucking Leo DiCaprio, like, who the fuck knows? The guy could be a fucking imbecile, I have no idea. You know, because I've watched him from fucking, like, you know, from like Growing Pains days to fucking Titanic to like all the Scorsese movies. I'm like, I just worship him, you know, because that's what we do. That's what we do.
How do you start working with Grindhouse and Addle Addle?
Oh, I just love their books. First BizarroCon, I split a room with Prunty, not even knowing who he was. Just people were on Facebook being like, I need someone to split a room with. I'm like, yeah, I'll split a room with you. And I was staying with Prunty, and we just cracked each other up. Like, we just had a good time talking, and we were just goofy and shit and joking around a lot and cracking each other up. He mentioned that he had a press, and I was like, all right, but, you know, I'm doing this new Bizarre author thing, and I just want to focus on promoting that book for the next year, and that's kind of what they want me to do. So I did that for, like, that year. But while that was all going on, I, like, picked up some of Grindhouse's books, and I was like, holy shit. Like, there's a lot of small presses I like. But Grindhouse and Atlatl is the only press where I've never read a bad book that they've done. Like, I love every single book that they've put out. There's not a single Grindhouse book that I don't like. And that's rare. You know, I love Eraserhead, but there's tons of Eraserhead books that were kind of meh to me. You know, like, I love there's tons. You know, like, I'll buy, like, almost, you know, every book that a lot of these different presses will come out. But I know that, you know, there's books that come out that I'm not going to like. Grindhouse, every book I like. So when I finished up that, you know, New Bizarre author season, I talked to Prunty at the next BizarroCon, and I was like, we were just talking about what kind of book he was looking for, and I took all those things and I kind of wrote the Party Lords for Grindhouse. And it was really fun working with him. He's a straightforward dude. And then, you know, I just kept sending my stuff to Grindhouse, and they kept accepting it. And yeah, it's been a good run. I still, you know, hope to send them some of my other stuff. But yeah, they're easy to work with, and they put out good books, and they're good looking books. So I just kind of, you know, like, I aim pretty intentionally. You know, like, even with Eraserhead, you know, like, I'd read so much Melick. I was such a fan of Melick and all their stuff, so I, like, worked really hard to get into the New Bizarre Author series, you know. Like, when I submit to a press, I very rarely do it blindly. I usually know the press pretty well before I submit to it.
Right. And that was the New Bizarro, the Crud Masters, that was truly your first book? Your first?
No. They bent on that rule for me a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Because I had Drinking Until Morning out first, but it wasn't Bizarro.
I see.
And very little reputation was kind of garnered from that, so it still felt like I was starting from scratch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because Drinking Until Morning came out with a small press initially called Black Coffee Press, and they were very small, and I had no idea, like, how to promote a book, so it's just kind of like, I don't know, like, I was living in Astoria, Oregon at the time. A lot of people in Astoria, Oregon read the book, but I don't think anyone else read the book. And so, you know, the Crud Masters was the first book I, like, really tried to get out there. Though my attempts to promote that book was completely ass. Like, it was just, like, I put all my energy into, like, reviews and just internet stuff and, like, having a blog and stuff, which can be fun. But, like, it's a very lonely, unstimulating experience in the end to just do, like, nonstop internet, no interaction, just, like, posting, like, weird contests and just dorky shit like that. And with the Party Lords, my promotion was, like, based on doing readings and, like, getting out there and interacting with people more. I segued pretty hard on that one. I don't even know what the initial question was. Oh, yeah, it wasn't my first book. No, it was not my first book.
Well, that's good because, you know, where I first saw you was, like I said, Party Lords. So what you were doing was working, because that definitely got a lot of talk, a lot of, you know, you got to read this, you got to read this. There were a lot of people talking about it, and that was that from, like, just getting out there doing cons and putting
yeah, I mean, some of it was, I will point out this happens with books a little bit. You'll have a little bit of, you know, you still get some like, some of the promotion that, like, I got with the Party Lords was actually from promoting the Crud Masters, was from, like, networking the Crud Masters a lot, you know, and kind of getting interest with the Crud Masters, and then people reading the Party Lords. But yeah, no, it was just from like touring around, like, during the year that Party Lords came out, I wasn't always reading Party Lords, but I was always like bringing Party Lords around with me. Because if I went to like a poetry gig, I'm not going to read the Party Lords because that crowd is just so damn sensitive,
Mm-hmm.
But I was doing a reading like 2 to 3 times a month that year. And usually at least one of those 3 readings would be the Party Lords. And the Midwest was a great place to do that in, too, because MP Johnson was up north, right? And he set up a bunch of shows that would be like in like Minneapolis or like Green Bay. And all of those shows were amazing. Like every single time I went up there, I sold a bunch of books and the people were down to earth and awesome. And then I was doing readings like in Racine. And then I'd like go down to like the Ohio area and read around there and shit. It was just a great time. It's hard to know why a book kind of makes like, gets any hype. Like, I mean, Party Lords by no means is a breakout book, but like I have no idea why it works, like it could, I've seen people have their books blow up just from doing internet shit, in many ways I can see like really knowing how to utilize the internet and reviewers and blogs being a more direct and effective way to promote your shit. But it's just not a satisfying way to me. Like, it just, like, in the end of, like, just being online constantly, just looking at this fucking computer screen all day, I feel like shit. Where if I go out and do a reading and it goes well, I feel fucking amazing, Like, I feel like I just, like, got out of the gym and I just exercised or something, But yeah, I love that kind of shit. Readings are the best, man. I've had some horrible ones. I've had some real demoralizing fucking readings, too. Like, doing a bad reading is like, ooh. Like, have you ever done a bad reading, man? Have you ever done a reading where, like, even if you're doing good, like, it just doesn't click?
You know that reading I did at CrawlCon?
Yeah.
That was the only reading I've done so far.
No, fuck off!
No,
that's a great first reading. That's
I know.
An amazing first reading, dude.
That's a problem.
Yeah, good job. I didn't even know that shit.
Yeah. That's a problem, though.
That's incredible stuff, man. Yeah, my first reading went okay. No, my first reading was goddamn awful. It was a really long time ago, and I was writing like really pretentious poetry, like really like ripping off fucking Rimbaud type shit, And I was in fucking Little Haiti in Miami, visiting my friend Lawrence, and we went to this fucking like crazy jazz bar, and in the back, there was a fucking like open mic going on. My girlfriend at the time, but my now wife was like, you gotta do this shit, man. You gotta do this open mic. And I was like, all right, but you're getting me fucking like completely hammered while I'm waiting. And she kept bringing me beers. Got really drunk. Got up there, tried to act all badass and shit. Started really nervously reading some poem that was like completely fucking horrible. And I was so nervous and shit. And then, like this guy came up, like people were leaving during the reading. By the time I'm done with my reading, there's literally like my friends and then one person in the audience. And yeah, God, it was rugged. It was a demoralizing experience.
That's gotta be rough. When I did mine, the only thing I was really worried about was that what I read wasn't published at all. Like that was the first time I presented that to anybody, so it was unvetted, and I'm like, I don't know how the fuck this is gonna come off. It just
that's a thing that I think sometimes us prose writers worry about too much. Like poetry people do that shit all the time. You know what I mean? Like I've seen people headline an open mic, right? Like be the featured poet at an open mic who haven't gotten a single poem published. And that culture is just more like that. So I knew, like, I'm very aware from, like, watching the poets that I'm like, oh, like, what goes, you don't need to get a thing published. There's no, what comes from getting published is just a thing that we have fun with. You know what I mean? There's other ways to kind of utilize writing and shit that have nothing to do with any of that kind of thing, So I think, I couldn't tell. I was surprised to find out that shit's not published. And that was one of the most entertaining pieces of the night. You should try to get that fucking thing published, man, if that's not already published.
I should. I'll just publish myself. I don't know where the fuck to publish it like that.
The same shit happened with MP Johnson. First time I saw him reading, he read a story called Berserkoids Are Here. right?
Oh yeah.
Funniest fucking thing to this day I've ever seen read, right? Like one of my favorite readings of all time.
Right.
And since then he's gotten it published, and it's even going to come out in like a book of short stories. I think it's the title piece of a book of short stories he has coming out.
Yes.
But at the time, the thing hadn't been published. You know what I mean? It's a little more risky, like when you're reading something that's been published that someone else out there was like, it's good.
Right.
But that's all that shit means. It's just one other person.
Yeah. It's true. It's it's funny. I'm into all this Bizarro stuff, but I'm like, I don't know where to publish this. I'm like, ding dong, you got all these people. But that's an anthology piece. To me, I hold a lot of stuff like that, and I'm just like, I'll put out my own thing one day. And that's kind of like it's one of them little things I write, and it just sits there because really what I'm looking to put out is longer stuff, and that's what I'm really working on trying to.
Right, and that's an interesting thing too. That like, I have a bunch of short pieces that I just kind of let like kind of fester. Then they just collect dust and shit. And it is usually for me, and this is a bad habit, I won't submit something until I see someone looking for something. Like for instance, CrawlCon, like Crawl was like, hey, are there any authors out there that want that will send me something that can be published as an exclusive CrawlCon chat book? And I was like, yeah, I got this one fucking 5,000 word short story that would make a really cool chat book, and I sent it to him and he liked it. But otherwise, I have like a stack of short stories, and
right?
Not novelettes and novellas that I just don't do shit with because I'm always putting too much effort almost into like the big project or whatever that big project is at the time.
Yeah, it's almost. Well, I mean, it's it's like you say, a 5,000 word. The best it's going to do is a chat book, and then that's a lot of effort to put something out on your own.
Yeah,
that's a chat book, so it's not where you want to focus your energies, but
right.
So, what are you looking to get out? Like, what are you looking to just get out of your writing? Like, are you just happy doing what you're doing, and like you say, you get to your readings and people enjoy it, and you get to connect with people? Or are you looking to make a living, make something bigger, get a bigger readership?
I have a handful of goals with that. I do want a bigger readership. I do want to engage it in a competitive way like that. I want to keep try to get more readers and try to sell as much as possible. I want to have that be something that I try to do. My goal financially isn't lofty. It's just I would like my books to fairly consistently supplement some part of my income in a substantial way at one point in my life. Have a book break out well enough that I can have something really paid for instead of the occasional fucking electricity bill or night out to the bar, I have a bunch of weird little goals with my fiction. All right, so there's this author I love, Larry McMurtry. He wrote Lonesome Dove and Last Picture Show in terms of endearment and stuff like that. And someone asked him what his biggest regret was in his writing career, and he said killing off the character Emma from Terms of Endearment. He's like, it was the best character I've ever written, and I felt I was so attached to her, and I wish I could still write stories based on her. I wish I hadn't killed her off. And I was like, wow, what an amazing thing to get so attached to a fictional character that you're upset when they die, I want to experience that at one point. I want to create characters that seem alive enough to me or three-dimensional enough that I actually get upset about them. I want to continue being honest, and I want to continue being prolific. And I want to, in the whatever writing community I'm working within, I would like to be supportive, but not, also a little bit of a challenging presence. Those are all kind of my goals with that shit. There's always going to be a little bit of a financial thing. It would be awesome. I don't have lofty goals with that shit at all. When I talk about making money, off my writing, it's nothing like making getting rich or even being fucking middle class with it. Just a decent enough chunk, 5,000 to 10,000 maybe one year would be nice.
Something to supplement a minivan payment.
Yeah, just one goddamn minivan. For fuck's sake, writing. What's going on? I just want one minivan payment.
I think I'm feeling it. It's going to start tonight. Like this, that's the new thing, minivan fiction.
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
And you're going to be like,
well, fun story. So the first book I tried to write for the new Bizarre Author series, right? Kevin Shamewell contacted me and asked me to submit something, and I sent him some pitches, and the one he liked was this story about a guy who gets stuck in an evil minivan. And the minivan's just taking him on a crazy terror ride, you know? And I wrote the thing over the period of a month, and he didn't like it. And, well, I think he liked it all right, but it was not bizarro enough. It was too horror-based. And then I had to write Crudmasters in like a week because the deadline was getting so close and shit. But yeah. Minivan. I have written a minivan book, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I wrote a fucking crazy minivan book. There was tons of weird shit in it. Like, there's a guy with a snake dick, umbilical cords, fucking, you know, like weird towns where people are lactating all over the place. It was fun.
Justin, I cannot wait for minivan poetry, minivan fiction, minivan everything. I am so excited for this. Is that your next thing? What's coming for you?
Oh shit. Right now I'm focusing on writing. There's actually like an epic poem I'm kind of trying to write for Carrion Blue Press, and I'm working on some stuff for Dynatox that I'm really enjoying writing. Actually, that's what I'm like very like, as in like right before we started talking, I was working on it. Yeah, I have a book of poems called Minivan Poems. You know, everything else about that project is yet to be revealed. Like the title isn't Minivan Poems. You know, the title and the press are all going to be kind of secret for the moment. But hopefully that will come out sometime this summer, hopefully. And yeah, you know, I have some other stuff that I've been working on too. There's a book I wrote called Grandma Face that I'm kind of cleaning up and hoping to get out there. But yeah, those are the minivan poems I have a feeling will be the next thing.
I cannot wait. Justin, it was a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Thanks, man. I love talking, man. I love just talking.
I know. When you came up to me at CrawlCon, I mean, you just started saying all the right things. I'm like, oh, this is a guy I could talk to. We're talking about MP Johnson. We're talking about Grindhouse. We're talking about all these readings. And it was a pleasure. So I just had to get you back and talk about everything that you do. I wanted to learn so much more, and I thank you very much. I appreciate
it, man. I love doing this kind of thing. I was shocked by how serious the beginning of the interview was. I was like, man, I can be a fucking serious son of a bitch sometimes. But yeah, no, man, it was a lot of fun, man. You're a great interviewer, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I hope to see you again soon, somewhere, sometime, somehow.
Yeah, man. It will happen. We don't live that far apart. You're in Jersey and shit, right?
That's right.
Yeah, no. I think I have a feeling we'll be running into each other.
Fantastic. We'll have to drive around your minivan next time we meet.
Hell yeah, man. I hopefully I'll have a minivan sometime again in the future. A man can only dream.
That's what we got. That's where all the words come from. Dreams.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Thank you very much for doing the podcast. Once again, best of luck to you with all your stuff.
Have a good night, man.
There he is, Zongers, the man who loves butts, Justin Grimbol. Hope you enjoyed. If you ever have a chance, you ever see him out in your neck of the woods doing a con, go check him out. He's a fantastic reader and a great guy to just shoot the shit with. I kid you not, after this interview was over, Justin and I talked for at least another hour, just shooting the shit back and forth. He's got opinions and everything. He's a great guy to learn from. Zongers, if you would so kindly now, head over to iTunes, head over to Stitcher, give us a thumbs up, give us stars, leave us a review. Those are very important things to this podcast and to the Project iRadio Network, to let everybody out there know that you love the show and exactly what you love about the show. On Stitcher, there's a little thumbs up, thumbs down. I hope you give it a thumbs up. And over on iTunes, give us stars, write reviews. All very, very important things to do for the podcast. So until next week, Zongers, keep it weird, keep it bizarre. You are dismissed. Check out these other great Project iRadio podcasts.
Joke and Tom Clark here, host of the Curtain Jerkers, Project iRadio's podcast that dumps pro wrestling journalism on its noggin. Between my co-hosts, Brody Kratz and Examiner Steve Mesa, keep you up to date on all the news in the universe of pro wrestling. Focus on the up-and-coming guys on the indie circuit, the real curtain jerkers of this industry. You can only hear us rant and laugh every Tuesday on Project iRadio.
Armcast, Dead Sexy Horror Podcast, with host Armand Rosamilia, where he interviews horror authors, filmmakers, actors, actresses, that hot dog guy outside of Walmart, maybe even a Walmart greeter. Who knows? That's Armcast Podcast, exclusively on Project iRadio.